All right, the next key question from Unit 3 that we're looking at here is from management activities, and we are looking at management control in particular. So remember, management activities, as far as Leaving Cert business goes, are planning, organising and controlling. We're zoning in here on management control. In that ABQ trends video for Unit 3, I mentioned this would be close to the top of my list because hasn't been seen in a few years, and it has been asked twice in the Unit 3 rotation for the ABQ before. And that's, look, it's really, we're looking at this because of the ABQ. Like, I think it cropped up last year as a shore question, 2024 management control, but it does have high ABQ potential. So if you look in the box there, so we're in the notes there on page 145, guys. So planning and organising both featured for management activities last year. It also looked to have high potential to be asked in the ABQ. It was planning last time in 2021. Organising is awkward to write into the ABQ. So in the trends video, we said there's never been a question really about organising. And then we have those 2 years there, so 2009 and 14, where we saw management control. So I just think it's one to know well. It could be a potential short question, but look, it came up as a short question last year, so less likely there. ABQ likely, or it could be part of question 5 in the long questions, which is the first question in part B. So what do you need to know? You have the definition of management control, so 2 sentences to explain it. You have to be able to explain stock control, and then you need to know what are the benefits of stock control or the efficiencies of good stock control, because that's the language they've used in the past, and then what are some methods of stock control. And then the same thing for the others, so explain quality control, how does a business benefit from quality control and how can they achieve it. Credit control, explain it, how does a business benefit from credit control and what are the methods to achieve it. And then same with financial control, explain benefits, methods. So looking at our keyword grid then, so we're going to start off with that definition for management control. So if it does come up in the ABQ, quite likely that you know, if it's a broad question about management activities and you're explaining 3 activities separately, so planning, orders and controlling, you will start by giving the definition of those things. So for controlling, you would start by saying this: it involves measuring any deviations away from a company's plans and then the putting in place of strategies to correct them. So it measures any deviations away from a company's plans and then involves putting in place of strategies to correct them or acting to correct them in some way. So controlling is about measuring any deviations away from the company's plans and then acting to correct those deviations or those movements away from their target, right? So there are 4 types of control. So the first thing we're going to look at here is stock control. So when you're explaining stock control, the first thing you want to say is this involves keeping optimum stock levels. Then you will have a second point of development which says it is concerned with having the right stock in the right place, the right time to meet production requirements. So that's why that's written that way. See the way we just have the word right, and we're going to use that. So we have the word right, we're going to put that before stock, place and time to meet production requirements. So it's concerned with keeping optimum stock levels, involves having the right stock in the right place, the right time to meet production requirements. There is one other place in the course where if you're asked to explain a term, you use the word right loads, and I'll just scribble it in there so you are aware of it. That is manpower planning. You use the word right loads and explaining that. So manpower planning is about having the right staff with the right skills in the right place, the right time. So it's just a little bit different. We're dealing with staff rather than stock, but it's a similar sort of way to explain it, right? So how would the business achieve effective stock control? So they could do regular stock takes, or they could implement a just-in-time, so JIT, just-in-time stock management system. They might use electronic data interchange to do that. So just-in-time is JIT and EDI is electronic data interchange. The benefits or the efficiencies of stock control, well, it reduces the holding cost from having too much stock. So like if you think about it, you've got stock, you need to keep that stock somewhere. So maybe you have to rent a warehouse or something like that to keep the stock. You have to pay rent, you have to pay insurance whilst it's there. So the more stock that you have sitting around, the bigger the space you need, the more rent you pay, the more insurance you pay, right? If you have an effective stock control system in place, it reduces the chance that the stock becomes out of date, it goes out of fashion, out of trend, or it dies depending on the nature of the stock. So it reduces the chance for obsolescence. It is better for liquidity Like you don't want to have too much money tied up in stock. So like if you obviously like as a business, you need to have money to pay your short-term debts as they fall due, right? But if you use your cash and put it into stock and that stock's sitting there, it's not really an effective use of your cash. Like if you're struggling to pay your bills and you've got all this money that you spent in stock that you're not using, well then next time try not to get your money tied up in stock like that. Use it to pay stuff and only have the right amount of stock. So if you're effective in your stock control systems, you won't experience those liquidity problems. And you won't experience lost sales for having too little stock. So really the first couple of points there, the benefits are all from having, potentially avoiding having too much. But if you have too little stock, you might lose out in orders because you're not able to take those raw materials and actually make them into something to meet the customer orders. Credit control is the next one. So this involves controlling credit. So we're talking about selling goods on credit and controlling that whole process. So it's about controlling the payment period and the amount given to customers. So the purpose of it is to reduce bad debts and ensure that payment is made in full and on time when we do business on credit. So selling goods, so effectively letting your customer to buy now and pay you later on, maybe in 30 days or something like that. So it's about controlling credit. It's about the amount given and the payment period. It's done to reduce bad debts and ensure that the business gets paid in full and on time. So how can the business implement this? Well, they can set credit limits. They might say, well, we're only willing in any one transaction to sell goods worth $5,000 on credit. So that means you're only liable for $5,000 in any one transaction. So like, let's say that you sell goods for $5,000, they go bust, they can't pay you, the max you can lose is $5,000, right? You can assess the creditworthiness of the people you're doing business with. So look for a trade reference or bank reference. You can incentivize early payment. Incentivize early payments. You can offer a discount. So 30 days to pay, but if you pay in the first 20 or first 10 days, we'll give you a 10% discount. Business can be organized. So that means sending invoices and making sure that the buyer is aware of what is due and when it's due. Or you could also have a penalty for late payment. So incentivize early payment, but also penalize late payment. Really, these guys here are important because they read a lot about, like you could see, we're kind of linking into Unit 4 here a little bit and what we encounter when we look at issues of cash flow and liquidity. Like if you're going to improve your cash flow and liquidity, these are the things that you want to do. So control credit, right? So it's kind of a link here. So it is good stuff to know. The benefits, like I said, it's good for liquidity. It means you get full payments made on time and it minimizes the risk of bad debt. So bad debt is you sell goods on credit, they go bust or out of business and they can't pay you and you have to write that off as an expense then. So that's credit control. Financial control is the next one. So this is concerned with controlling profitability and liquidity. The methods of doing it, well, cash flow forecasts, liquidity ratios, and cost reviews will help to achieve financial control. Benefits, you get an early warning sign of any financial problems, but also good financial control system will help when the business is seeking finance. So if you're going to investors to raise capital, or you're going to the bank to raise debt, so you're going to get out a loan, they will look for a cash flow forecast maybe to see that you've got good financial control. And then the last thing is quality control. So this involves checking and inspecting work done. The reason why, to ensure that it meets required and expected standards. So some ways you can implement quality control. So conduct physical inspections, so that's sampling, so maybe actually checking every 10th or 20th product that gets produced and making sure there's no defects. There could be quality circles, or you could obtain a Q mark, so a quality symbol. Benefits here, you get repeat purchasing because you're associated with quality, consumers can trust you. Reduces the administrative costs associated with returns. So if you're selling defective products, you will get returns and there's costs associated with that. But if every product you turn out has got zero defects and it's absolute quality, well then you won't have those issues. So you have the keyword grids there to practice. Once you're happy that you've got those keywords committed to memory, have a look here at page 147 and tackle this question. Pause the video whilst you do it, then come back and I will take you through the marketing scheme. So the question here says, look, immediately I see this kind of mini ABQ style thing, or this kind of introductory piece. An alarm bell goes off in my head and I think they're going to ask me to refer to the business in the question, so I'll have to drop them into the answer and there'll be marks in the marketing scheme for it. So if you see here, it says, Alan Naughton is an entrepreneur who set up M6 Motors in 2011. The business is now one of the leading car sourcing companies in Ireland. As the business grew, he expanded his workforce. The company specialised in high-spec cars at competitive prices. So our question here is discuss, it's going to always box the verb, how stock control and quality control can achieve efficiencies. So really the benefits. What are the benefits of stock and quality control for a business such as M6 Motors? So they've dropped in the business name there, so you need to refer to M6 in your answer. So the verb discuss has kind of changed in recent years. It was the case that when it was discussed, you weren't meant to use a heading. You had to put what would have been a heading into a sentence instead as your statement. But they have kind of gone back in recent years to using headings. So it's kind of just a state and explain. We're looking at the marking scheme. It's a 20-mark question here. You have 8 minutes to do the question. Looking at it, so you're basically asked to explain, to talk about stock control and quality control. So with stock control, so 10 marks, it's a 20-mark question. It is 10 marks for explaining how stock control can achieve efficiencies and 10 marks for explaining how quality control can achieve efficiencies. So we take stock control here. You would get 4 marks for explaining stock control using keywords from the course. Your next 4 marks come from a second point of development about stock control, so your second bit of textbook knowledge or keywords. And then finally, the 2 marks for your reference to M6 Motors and how it would achieve efficiencies for them. So explain, refer to the business. You do the exact same thing with quality control here. So if we're looking at the sample answer there, we are on page 148. No heading for stock control, as no marks for stock control as a heading, because we're given that term in the question. So stock control is concerned with keeping optimum stock levels so the business doesn't have too much or too little stock. So that is the first part of our definition, probably good enough there for 4 marks alone with that. And then this is about having the right stock in the right place at the right time to meet production requirements and satisfy consumer demand. That's our next point of explanation. That is another 4 marks. Then our link to M6. M6 can achieve efficiencies with better stock control by avoiding those excess storage costs that we mentioned earlier. So we're talking about things like rent, insurance, security. So 4, 4 and 2 there. Quality control then, this is concerned with inspecting work done to ensure it meets the required standards. Good enough for 4 marks there. As part of a quality control system, business could achieve a quality symbol such as an ISO 9000 award. So good textbook knowledge there. That would probably be good enough for the next 4 marks. Or we could say business might conduct sampling and use quality circles. So 2 different ways there of kind of describing how quality control can be achieved or implemented. And then we need that link to M6. A good quality control system will lead to repeat purchasing, customer loyalty for M6. They'll be associated with high quality, or you could say that they'll minimize the costs associated with returns as well. Could be another route to go there. And then you're done, 10 and 10, 20 marks overall. On the next page, I just threw this in as a question. I like this because it does have a lot of links with the stuff that you see in Unit 4, right? Explain the methods a business could consider to minimize the risk of bad debts as part of its credit control system. But it's really all about improving liquidity here. That's the thing. So they're looking for 3 methods there. So state and explain, state and explain, state and explain. So come and look at sample answer. So you could say, for example, assess customers' creditworthiness for 4 marks, explain. So this means check their previous history. So ask for bank references or trade references. You could set appropriate credit limits and credit periods, so about the amount given and the time period for payment. So you draw clear terms and conditions controlling the amount of credit and ensuring that payments are made in time. So set a credit limit of £5,000 and a limit of 1 month for any one payment, right? You could have a policy for late payments. So make sure that there's some sort of interest charge on overdue accounts that incentivizes customers to pay up on time. You could also incentivize early payments, remember. And then that last thing about be organized, make sure that invoices are sent out in time so that customers are aware of what's due, when it's due, and when they are approaching the end of their credit period. But it is worth looking at because it does tie in with some of the stuff that you see in Unit 4 with cash flow forecast, ratios, liquidity, all that stuff.